everything that we do, and this deal is a perfect example, whether you're doing your first wholesale deal, your first $5 million warehouse deal, your first 8-figure, $25 million land deal, you just take the very next step and you figure it out as you go. The path will always illuminate as you walk it. And everybody wants to know everything before they jump in. And it just never works like that. It has never worked like that before for me, ever one time. Everybody that I talk to that performs at a high level takes action, figures it out as they go. And that's exactly what we did on this. And, it applies towards anything that you're doing.
We have an extra special treat for you today. Not only do we have Jason Pritchard, which you all know and love, but we got someone you should know and love, and that is Scott Faro with us today. And really what we're going to talk about today is how Scott has gone from unpaid intern through a year of struggle to ultimately becoming a business partner with Jason Pritchard. Jason, we already know who you are. Let's learn who Scott is. Scott, give us your bio, your resume. Let's introduce yourself to the audience.
What up, everybody? Scott Faro. I work with Jason here in Fresno. Got into the real estate world in 2018, and definitely have had some ups and downs, but it's been a fun story so far, an adventure, one might say.
Yeah, well, I think you're underselling it. So, Jason, we're going to go to you. One of the things I love about you, you've done for years, is you bring on unpaid interns. And if they work out, they become employees, paid employees. Yep. And, typically there's an evolution, but Scott's kind of run the gamut now. And he's a business partner with you on a new deal, which we will talk about. But just talk about Scott, the unpaid intern, how it happened. What was he doing? Because I think a lot of people need to realize we all start somewhere.
Yeah, Scott, I think, has a really amazing origin story. And so I'll give you that condensed version of that, and then we'll get into the deal. So 2018, we were focusing a lot on our real estate agent business. So a partner of mine at the time, a guy named Benny Clay, and I had formed a team of real estate agents. I was the investor. Benny was the high performing agent. And our vision at that time was to grow a team of people that could basically take our two skill sets, we could download them into our team, and then we could help our clients with both investing and the agent side of the business. And Scott was a barista at a local small coffee shop, even one of the drive-through kiosks. I don't know if Scott even worked at like the actual coffee shop.
I didn't make the cut.
He didn't even make it to the storefront. He just made it to the little kiosk there. And it happened to be literally like right down the street from our office. And so I think Benny would go and get coffee from the kiosk. And Scott, I don't know, I think he just chatted Benny up one time. Scott's got a very outgoing personality and not afraid to talk to people with his skill set that helps a lot in this business. And he ended up coming on just in I think a marketing aspect to help with little administrative, the things that interns do. You know what I mean? Just doing the little stuff. And we were still, 2018 was 4 years into the business for me. So I was still very much new and trying to figure out what we were doing. And that was the beginning of it. And we were just kind of starting there with that internship role. And, eventually Scott got licensed. He started doing some of the lead generating activities that we did. And that really gets, I think, us to the beginning of the first real struggle that Scott had. And maybe we can expand on that. It was, similar to me. We've talked a lot about my journey, and I spent a year just figuring it out, working hard every single day and not making any money. And I think a big misconception that a lot of people have when they look at social media or, the stuff on HGTV and Netflix, it's they think automatically they call themselves a real estate agent or investor and the money magically starts pouring in, and they are not, they're not used to, or they're in for a rude awakening, I guess I can say. And Scott had that rude awakening about a year in, and that's when his story, I think, gets really interesting.
Yeah, Scott, I want to go back to you because this was, whether you knew it or not, was one of those inflection points in life that would have sent you down a completely different path. And I remember this, right? Because, I was in your world in 2018, and you were doing a lot of the right things. You were doing a lot of the activities. You were networking. You were growing, but frankly, you weren't seeing the money. And money was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think you had a conversation with your dad, if I remember the story correctly. You had obviously lots of conversation with Jason and others. And you just had to make a personal call. Am I going to give up on this? maybe go back to college, maybe go get just a W-2, or am I going to find another way? So why don't you talk about that moment? Because, that path, your life could be very different today based on that decision.
Yeah. Reflecting on it, I've condensed the story down to just the key highlights, which was I started and it seemed actually like a get rich quick scheme, because in the first 6 months I ended up making about 50 grand, which when you're 18 or 19, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with the accountant and owing 10 grand to the IRS, and I didn't have it. That was the first kind of rude awakening. And then I went 6 months with no deals. And that was like the period in my life where I hadn't really planned to get kicked out of the house, but I did. And so I had no safety net. I was fighting with my parents, which all 18-year-olds do. And so they said, "You're a big boy, go figure it out." And at the 6-month mark, I don't know why, but as a last ditch effort, I bought some golf clubs so I could go find clients, because Benny was a big golfer and he got a lot of clients from golf. And it was my subjective opinion that golf will lead to more money.
Got it.
And I spent my last $700 on a set of golf clubs I still have. And I remember at the time, my girlfriend, now wife, was like, "This is a horrible idea." She's an accountant. She's working, paying through school. And I remember her being like, "Don't do this." And I did it. And then I just remember the anxiety like becoming overwhelming and being like,
Right.
I don't have enough money to pay rent. And I met with my dad and I said, like, "This is the mistake I made. I don't know how I'm going to get through it." And he had offered to help me, but with the caveat we had to have a game plan on how I was going to pay him back.
Right.
And so talk about negotiating. I had asked for $3,500 and he asked why. And he ended up settling at $500, enough to pay rent and one's week worth of food. And I went and I got a job at Ruth's Chris. I had a background in bussing tables. I never made server because I'm not a very good salesperson. And so I was bussing tables. And for me, that period, like what you're saying, was a huge inflection point. It was a moment where I was considering going back to school because my parents didn't fully believe in real estate. They were like, "Hey, we'll pay for you to go to school. Go do that." And I ended up kind of digging my feet in the ground and started working at real estate at like 8 a.m. And then I get off around, and Jason remembers this, I would change in the bathroom at the office into my Ruth's Chris outfit. And I go bust tables from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And I did that 5 or 6 days a week. Then I go home, I'd play some video games. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd do it again. And that period was pretty stressful. And I've told this to a lot of people, but I actually broke up with my now wife at the time because I had to make a decision on where my time was going to go. And she said, "I need more time." And I said, "I need to make through this. Like, I need to get through this."
Wow.
And so we broke up in May. And from May to December, essentially Christmas, I just worked my ass off. I ended up making $100,000 from real estate. I put every penny I could away. I did not spend a dime on anything. I was telling Jason I want to get a car. He was like, "Don't get a car." I was like, "I want to go get this." He's like, "Don't get that. You need to build a safety nest." And then finally at the end of the year, I was able to stop working at Ruth's Chris and go back full time. And thank God I've been smart enough now to manage my money so that when these good times and bad times come, you can ride the wave all the way.
Yeah. So Jason, there's a lot in that story. Obviously you kept being a sounding board for Scott. What do you remember about that 8-month journey that Scott went on, kind of rebuilding the nest egg, doing the hard stuff that lots of people wouldn't, frankly, most people would give up. What do you remember about that time period?
It's a lot of things. And Scott said something important at the end. And I've heard this recently on different podcasts and content. I think Alex Hormozy was doing an interview and he calls this period the lonely season. And it's like this period of time when you have to, if you want to really kind of get out of like the rat race and detach from corporate America and all the things that we're kind of like ingrained and indoctrinated into do, you have to have this period of time. And I had something very similar where I didn't turn my back on friends and families and loved ones, but I had to spend a couple years just focusing on myself, and that's it. And everything else has to go out of the window. And I think everybody that I've seen that has found success at a high level, they have some variation of that lonely season there. And I do remember talking to Scott, And I think there's a couple different things that stand out in my head. We talk openly about, I just burned all the boats and I went all in on real estate. And, I walked away from the 6-figure income and I was the main breadwinner in my house. And I do not think, frankly, that is the optimal decision for most people. And I think and Scott is kind of like this too. I think I have a mindset and a gear where I perform very well under pressure. I like that type of pressure. I think I rise to the occasion in those type of situations. And I think a lot of times when you make this transition from trading your time for money and you're used to a consistent paycheck and you're really used to, I work and then I get paid for it. That is not how things work in our business. You do not get paid for your time. You get paid for producing a result. And until you learn how to produce that result, you're never going to see any income from it. And if you are brand new to this business, if you really zoom out a little bit, it does make sense that at the beginning, it's going to take some time for you to get good at producing that result, especially on a consistent basis, right? So you may do it once and get lucky, or you may get a little string of like Scott said, hey, we had a burst where we made some income, but 6 months doesn't make a career in real estate, right? And so you have to get really, really, really bought into the idea of A, this lonely season is going to happen. B, I'm going to have to get great at managing my finances. And C, I may have this period of time where I'm going to have to work more than I'm used to get good at doing this. So I'm going to have some income coming in from a side hustle or my W-2 or whatever it is. And that's going to be the vehicle that feeds this period of maybe low income. This is kind of your internship period, right, in the real estate business. And I think Scott, to his credit, and it's not easy to do, especially at a young age. You have all these different things that are pulling you in different directions. I've got a girlfriend, I've got my friends, I've got an image that I want to keep, you know what I mean? All that stuff. And I think to his credit, he hunkered down, and I think the decision has paid off big time for him.
Oh yeah, no question. The result is awesome. One of the things, Scott, I knew I wanted to ask you for the audience was, I'm going to guess. So if it didn't happen, just straight up tell us, but I'm going to guess your ego probably took a pretty big hit when you had to, go get a job at Ruth's Chris. Yes, Ruth's Chris is a nice restaurant, all of that. But you were a real estate investor, and having to go get a day job or a night job probably didn't make the ego feel good.
Yeah, there were a couple times I ran into people I knew and I was bussing their table, and I remember comments being made, and they probably weren't negative comments. They probably were genuinely surprised to see me and happy to see me. But I remember multiple times walking into the back of the kitchen with a ton of dirty dishes. I'm a germaphobe too, so that adds to kind of the ego hit that I'm literally like picking up dirty dishes as a germaphobe. But yeah, there were times where I was like, wait, I thought you were in real estate. And I'd have to say, oh, I am in real estate. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm working here to help pay the bills. And I think I now look, because I run into people all the time who have side hustles. And it never occurs to me to ever look down on them. So I have to think to myself, like, why would anybody have thought down on me? But I know I thought poorly of myself at the moment. Like,
yeah,
you screwed up. You spent your money. You got kicked out of the house. You're the one that has to go clean tables while these other people are doing whatever. They're partying, they're going to school, whatever they're wanting to do. But I do think that genuinely a lot of the comments that were made that made me feel really bad probably weren't actually made poorly. I think a lot of people respect working hard.
Yeah. Again, I don't know who any of these folks are, but if they're folks in our community, they were probably meant with compassion and respect. But again, it doesn't matter how they meant it. It always means how you receive it.
Exactly right.
If you received it that way, those are, I mean, you often feel it. I always feel things. And I'm sure you can always call upon that. Because one of the things I think you'll know in a decade is you'll always be able to call upon the fact that you can do hard things. You can get through this. And not a lot of people can say that. A lot of people coast through life on easy street. They never get uncomfortable. They never take a risk. And, you did. And it was looking dicey. And then,
and I've hit that a couple times. It's not just one time. There's been multiple times where it looked a little dicey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jason, you have a history of hiring interns, unpaid interns, and then making them employees. Why don't we talk about your experience doing that? Because there was a time, I read this in a post of yours. I do not know if it's still true, but every unpaid intern, at least up to a point, had become a paid employee. I don't know if that's still true.
Yeah, we've got four. I'm the record now is 4. Scott was the first one. And his journey even after this is cool, and we should expand on it some more too, because I think there is some more bumps in the road that he brought up, and that kind of brought us back together to the point that we're at now. But yeah, it's worked out well for me. I think a lot of the public facing stuff that I do, the events and the meetups and the social media, and just how my approach of just giving freely without expectations, I get a lot of people that are interested in doing some type of work with me. And Scott was the first intern, and his good friend Cade, who was my second intern, has now come on as our COO, so he's helping Scott, and he's his counterpart on the operations side. And now we've got our full-time acquisitions member, Marissa, is also there. And then our fourth one, Carmen, is now helping us on dispositions with our wholesale business. And so it's been a little bit of run of luck, but I think, when you work really hard and you do the right thing and you come from a good place, you get lucky sometimes. And so it's been a cool experience for sure.
I don't know if you could call 4 for luck at this point.
Yeah.
I think you've got a track record that you can lean on, and your radar for picking good people is
That's right.
Probably second to none.
Yep.
Well, Scott, let's get into those other rocky points or struggles that Jason kind of highlighted. Where do we go from that? Where do we go in this journey?
Man, I don't want to make the whole podcast about me.
Well, it is kind of about you. We already know Jason's a rock star. This is
what I think is cool is I think the stuff that you guys have done in Indiana, that was kind of a cool highlight for me anyways, because I think we got past this rocky period and you buckled down and you followed the process, trusted the process. Then you started to get some results. Then our team started to grow a little bit, right? And then we started to get kind of a hot market in real estate. And so I think that lifted everybody up. And then I think a really cool thing for me that I'd like to highlight is, I know when Scott and Cade initially bought some rental properties out in Indiana, I was fortunate enough where I was the private money lender for them to go buy. I don't know, I can't remember the numbers, but I think you bought like four houses, and I gave them a loan for $100,000 or $150,000. And I was their first private money lender on some deals that they did. And that was a really cool experience for me too. So Scott can probably fill us in on that.
Yeah, after I hit consistency, then I started getting the nest egg, and then started talking to people. What do you do once you have enough kind of saved? And the idea was go buy rentals. So Cade and I had met and decided we were going to buy rentals out of state because it was the place where we could afford to get in, and it had cash flow, because we couldn't find ways to get cash flow where we were at. And you can see I have South Bend right here. We ended up buying 9 houses in South Bend over 2 weeks.
Wow, that's a little fast. That's a little fast.
Yeah. And so talk about the ups and the downs, right? You buy the first set. Those were awesome. We still have 4 out of the 4 of that. We bought 5 right after that. Another lender saw Jason lend and said, well, if he'll do it, I'll do it. So we bought 9 homes. We made some mistakes. We ended up selling a couple problematic properties and kind of rode the ups and downs of out-of-state investing. And we still have 5 houses out there. And then what was funny was, after we kind of got to this point, Jason ended up saying he needed to take time back and really focus on the investing business. And this was in 2021. And I remember that time Jay was like, yeah, I'm never going to be distant from you guys, but I need to like hunker down right now and focus on the investing business. And so he peeled away, and Cade and I decided we were going to go out on our own. And we went out on our own, and to our credit, we did operate well for a while. And we went from 2021, 2022. And in 2022, I did like 50 something deals by myself with like a couple of VAs, cold calling through Stratton's company, and made a ton of money, paid for the wedding, paid for a car, paid for the dogs, paid for a house. I mean, I went all out that year. And at the end of the year, we went on our honeymoon. And when we came back, the market was dead. It was like, I went from like 10 contracts at any given point to like a 2-month span where I didn't get anything. And that was really the second time that like things started to get on the rocks. And I remember I got home and it was like a completely different market than when I had left for Cancun for my honeymoon. And I had just spent all this money to kind of get my life set up. And I'm like, well, shit, now I don't have anything to finance my life, right? And I reached out to Jason when I got back, because at that point I was starting to get burned out. Doing 50-something deals solo is just, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort. And that was a mix of retail and a mix of wholesaling. And I remember getting back and talking to my wife and saying, well, okay, well, we got the house, we got the car, we got the dog, we're married. Now what? And I just remember thinking like, man, I'm going to have to restart this whole engine again. And I was like, that sucks. But what you were saying about calling back on hard times, one thing I have to credit my wife for, she always, anytime I doubt anything about if we can make something happen, she's always like, you're the hardest worker I know. You will figure it out. I can't tell you how, but you've always figured it out, which I see Jason give his wife a lot of kudos. I should be doing the same more publicly, more frequently, but Kayla has definitely encouraged me to stay strong on a lot of different sides of life. And it was interesting because I reached out to Jason. I just sent a text saying, hey, dude, when you have time, let's grab lunch. Just want to chat if there's an opportunity to work together. And I didn't have an idea of what that was going to look like, but my dad had told me to reach out to Jason, because I was talking to my dad like, man, this is by yourself. It's a lot. And so it took a little time. Jay was obviously busy, and you were dealing with some stuff too with the market shift. But come April, I was pretty much at a turning point where I had kind of threw out some feelers in the tech world to go work in sales and tech, because that's where my family's at. And I had gotten some pretty good offers, to be honest. And I had a commercial guy reach out to me and offer me some stuff as well. And I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe the run was just to get my life started, and now I'm going to switch gears. And I sat down with Jason over at House of Juju, and I just said, like, this is what I'm good at. And if I can take that off of your plate and you go do other stuff, this will be the best partnership we can come up with. And what, Jay, you thought about it for a week or so, and you kind of molded over, because you were not excited about bringing on extra expenses at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was, even for me, a pivotal moment. I can draw a line back to this, kind of when Scott and I came back together, this period in early 2023. And we've talked openly. That was financially, the start of the year was really rough. We were making some big changes in our business model, and I've always had a lot of self-confidence in my ability to perform. I think that's one of the big things. It's just like, hey, if we're going to do this, it's already done. And regardless of whatever we're dealing with right now, I think I can make things happen like that. And I've got a track record of doing it. But in that period of time, it was tough, man. You know what I mean? We're coming off of a lot of big losses. It's like, dude, do I want to, invest more money into the business? Do I want to, give up more of the bottom line to bring somebody on? Because, when you're bringing talent like Scott on, that's not going to be cheap. You're going to have to, invest financially into that. But I think a lot of the, however many years it was of us working together before that, either directly or indirectly, I felt like there wasn't a person that I would have had more confidence in. I just basically told myself, it's like, hey, if I'm going to do this, Scott's going to be the guy. It's like, there is not a better fit for me to do this. And one of the things that created a plateau in my business for, I'd say, 2022, 2023, is I was still very much in the acquisition seat in our company. And we had really trained and hired up virtual sales team members. And so they took some of that heavy lifting off of my plate, but the face-to-face interaction, the going into a seller's house, doing all of that stuff, even though we were doing a lot of virtual acquisitions because of COVID, and that was kind of where we shifted, I just did not have the time to go on all the appointments that are required. And that was, one of the biggest game changers in the business. And I think that me being able to take that off my plate and put the acquisitions piece on the shoulders of somebody that I really trusted was something that I was really hesitant about, because, it's a big, it's a big thing, because if that's I can go out and close, and if I send somebody else out there and they don't close, that we're not talking about a little bit of money that just got left on the table. If our average deal is 30, 40, 50 grand, or a big deal is $100,000, and we miss more than a couple times, we're talking about a lot of money that, is not coming into the company, right? That somebody else is going to take. So, there was, there was hesitation around that. There was hesitation around where we're at in the market and some of the financial hits that we took. But I think I needed, above and beyond all of that stuff, one of the things that really was, I think, even bigger than all of that for me, like buying back the time and not being stuck in the acquisitions role, was Scott challenges me, and I mean challenge in a good way, that nobody else really can do, because I respect Scott's opinion very much on the business and giving a contrarian opinion about my thing. And this is nothing against anybody else that I work with, but I can be like a very commanding, demanding personality. And so lots of times people will just be like, what do you want to do in this situation, Jason? Like, how do you want to do it? Right. And instead of sometimes giving me feedback or saying like, well, why don't we try this? Or what about this idea? A lot of people are just going to rely on me to make the call. And I can do well in that position, but I think having somebody there like Scott kind of opened my brain up to maybe more possibility and more stuff. And once we got into the groove of like, wow, this is working, right? Not only is deal flow not stagnating or falling off, it's actually picking up, and I've got more time to focus on other things. Then it was like, bam, then we started to go. And then operationally, Scott helped me a lot. We tied up a bunch of loose ends. We cleaned up a lot of just like bad, messy things that we were doing from an operational standpoint. And when you put all of that stuff together, it just created this amazing synergy. And our business has gone like this in the last 2 years. And it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of intentional. It was a lot of calculated risk. So it just didn't happen by accident, obviously. But, from 2023 to where we are now, almost this 2-year run, I know we're going to talk about some of these larger deals that we're doing. We're going to make, this big land deal that we're doing, that we're going to make 8 figures on, this big warehouse deal. None of that happens if I don't have the bandwidth and the capacity to take the things that I'm good at and focus them at bigger targets. And so all of that stuff led to the things that we're doing now.
Michael, I know you've been quiet and you probably have a question, but I want to chime in one other thing. When Jason and I were talking, the big thing in 2023 was that we both could have continued to operate solo, and I think we would have been fine. I don't think either of us would have had any major issues. But there is something about when you align with people that think the way you do, that are moving and hustle the way you do, like it's that whole idea you can go fast alone, but if you want to go far, you go together.
Yeah.
I've noticed that like there is some synergy, and like what Jason's saying, challenging. It's not competition per se, but we're both extremely competitive, hyper-focused, like go people. And I think when you put enough of those in the right room, we solve problems faster, we move quicker. We're doing a lot more than what any of us could have done solo. And we all probably could have built similar businesses solo. Just everything moves quicker when there's alignment between the staff and the people. And just there's like also a very deep-seated trust. And we both had to give up big things. Like I went from being 100% profit maker to just working on a team again. Jay had to give up a piece of the pie to bring me in. And we both were like a little bit hesitant at the start. And we said, okay, we're going to give it 6 months and we're going to revisit. And I can say within like the first, 2 or 3 months, we had seen a massive pickup in production. And we were like, this is going to work. Now we just have to give it time.
Yeah. So, now we just add water and go.
Exactly. Just keep adding to the machine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jason, you kind of hinted at because you have more time, you can look at new things. We could talk about the land deal or the warehouse. Which one do you want to talk about first?
I mean, I think the warehouse is kind of the one that's prevalent to this, but we can definitely talk about both, because I think the future of our company and what we're building out now is going to be and look and feel a lot different because of these changes that we made a couple years ago that we're talking about. So, again, the big piece was Scott coming in. I was able to step back, buy more time. As the company grew, we were able to take some of that additional revenue that was coming in and reinvest it back into systems, back into marketing, back into more team members to really build a solid foundation. And as that happened, these other opportunities start coming up, right? And so, the warehouse deal was a very interesting thing, because it was not on our radar at all. And it came from just our bread and butter core daily business practices. So this was a cold call lead that just came in. I mean, it was literally one of our virtual team members from the Philippines was in the trenches every day doing their job, calling through to just, see if they could, find sellers and just generate leads into our business. And the seller that we spoke to was one of the owners of this building. And we initially called them about, I think, a single family residence that they owned. Right. And they happened to own another property. And we reached out, and hats off to Lori, our cold caller. And she just, the seller was like, well, hey, I'm not interested in selling this property, but, is your company interested in buying a warehouse that we own? Because if they are, we can get some more information. So we pivoted the conversation over there. And then Scott, we ended up getting the information in, and, the land deal, this deal, it's very similar. You get these opportunities where they come in and you have a fork in the road that you can come into, right? And so the fork is like, hey, we're doing really well. Like, let's not get distracted. Let's not get shiny object syndrome. Let's just focus on what we're doing that's working, right? We don't need to buy some 54,000 square foot or 53,000 square foot warehouse that we don't know we have no idea what's going on. And let's just keep sticking with the program, right? And with this deal and this big land deal, right, I think it made sense at that point to just do a little bit more due diligence, right? And so we did some more due diligence, and this was all Scott, frankly. Like, if you would have given me the reins to make the decision, I'd be like, no, I don't want this. Like, let's just tell them we're not interested and let's move on. But I think Scott saw something in that opportunity, and I think as you get more seasoned and tenured and more experience in the real estate business, deal finding, there is a science and then there's an art to it, right? So the science is the numbers, and let's look at the price, and let's look at the value add proposition, and let's look at all the analytics in the spreadsheet. And the art is your instinct. It's this natural instinct as a business person that you develop over just years and years and years of doing deals. And it gets, as you hone it and you build that muscle and you get it stronger, that instinct is usually what will tell you, especially if it's an opportunity that you've never done. It's an asset class or it's a business. You've never done it before. You don't even have the data. You don't have the science part down because you haven't underwritten those deals before. So something about this deal was like, Scott said, hey, dude, let's just look at it, right? And then we went out. It doesn't cost any time or money to drive out. It was a local property. It was over by the airport, 20 minutes from our office. We can go over there whenever we want, met the seller, and we saw the video of the property. And I think Scott came back and was even more excited after looking at it. And, we basically just said, hey, raised his hand and was like, look, I will do all the legwork on this. I'll do all the heavy lifting. I will do all the research. Let me just see if this is a deal so you don't have to worry about it. And what I ask is just for an opportunity to participate as an owner in this particular deal, right? And I was like, sure, why not, dude? I mean, for me, that was the thing. As long as the main thing does not become, we don't lose a focus on the main thing, and you want to do this, then let's do the side quest if that's what you want to do.
So Scott, what I mean, I've been doing real estate for 25 years now. I have no idea what to do with a 54,000 square foot warehouse lead, let alone opportunity. So tell us about uncovering this. What was this? What was the gut? Because clearly your gut was telling you something. What was it about this that you said, hey, there's something here?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, Michael, if a seller calls you and has motivation, that's the most important thing. And I could tell it was two old guys, really, transparent sellers. They just said, we're ready to be retired. We're ready to get out of it. And to me, it was like retiring landlord, right? I've dealt with a million of them. So I was like, okay. And I just started asking questions about their situation. And I never talked about the building itself. He really wanted to talk about the building, but I was more curious about what was getting him to sell.
Right.
And when it became clear to me that it wasn't the building causing him to sell necessarily, it wasn't the asset type, it wasn't that commercial's on the downfall. It was just, I'm retiring and I want to be done, and I want to be done. Yeah. Nothing to do with it. I said to myself, I've been waiting for these opportunities. And if I could get one deal that makes up 10 or 100, like, why not do that? And so
that's awesome.
Because it was local, I didn't see any issue going out. I looked at the area. I said, it's by the airport. I looked at the building on Google. It looks super clean. I took a look at the area and was like, you know what? What's the worst that I do? I waste an hour of my time and I tell the seller, hey, this isn't something we'd be interested in. And then I guess I'd propose the question to you. If you've never done a deal in an asset type, what's the first thing you do once you walk it?
What would I do?
Yeah. What's the first thing you do when you get back?
Well, the first thing I do is call out to friends that have done work in that asset type.
That's exactly step number one. I had been getting drinks with some buddies that are in the industrial world for years. And I never knew when we would work together. I just knew they're the people I trusted. And I sent them all the info I collected. And I said, I don't know if this is even worth looking into. And they said, in all of the commercial world right now, industrial is the safest, best investment that we can think of.
Yep.
And I said, well, okay. And I just moved forward one step. And then I kind of started playing around and I looked up on YouTube and I called a couple other investors and I just said, how would you look at it? And we ended up, the first people I reached out to went above and beyond board and sent us like an entire spreadsheet, a breakdown, a nuts and bolts of like, here's the comps, here's what we would offer, here's what we think is a great deal, a good deal, and a bad deal. And so I called the seller back. And at that point I said, hey, full disclosure, I'm not a commercial investor, but I am interested. And if I were to make you an offer right now, I'd probably offer you about $4.2 million. And when they did not immediately shut that conversation down, I turned to Jason and was like, we are going to do this deal. I don't know how, like, we have to figure it out. And he kept saying, just as long as you keep moving it forward, like keep throwing ideas back to him. And so it ended up taking like 3 months to really kind of get to contract. But over time, we got on a exclusive or excluded from the listing because the property was going to get listed. We were bargaining back and forth. We were getting questions answered. And then ultimately we struck up an agreement like one day after it hit LoopNet.
Mm. So what? I
want to chime in with a couple different things because there's a lot. Please. I think a lot to this process of actually closing the deal. It's one thing to generate the lead, but then it's another thing to close on a $5 million building when our typical projects are $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, right?
Jason, it's just an extra zero. Come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's just 10 times the amount of money. Yeah, so whatever. So it was Scott brought this up. He said, hey, like I reached out to some buddies, right? And we always talk about the value of relationships and how relationship capital is so valuable in the real estate business more than any other industry that I've ever been in. And I don't want to just glaze over that piece because, this was a relationship from back when it was a relationship that was formed back when we were that original team of agents, right? We had moved over to this brokerage, right? And from the first brokerage that we're at to another, we moved our team over there. And the office that I had was right next door to a team of guys that were the commercial arm of that local brokerage, just by chance. And I befriended one of the guys. Scott befriended both of them. And that was a relationship that 3 years later, from nurturing and just genuinely, like we weren't doing commercial deals. We weren't sending them business. We just connected with them. And we nurtured that relationship through just genuine, whether it's personal going out and just being friends and being social or just talking shop or whatever. And however many years after that relationship started, then there was some synergy that was there. And then I want to talk about the partner that we brought in on this deal. This was somebody that I met 10 years ago, literally never have done business with him before. And we just stayed connected, nurtured the relationship. And then there was an opportunity to work with him and bring him in, because the way that the deal was initially structured was we were going to have to put down, we thought, about $1.7 million in the form, of a form of a down payment to get a bridge loan, right? And I mean, collectively between me and Scott, I think we were comfortable putting up like $700,000 or maybe $800,000 in cash, right? He was going to put up a couple $100,000. I was going to put up the balance, but we still needed to bring a lot of capital to the table. So that was our first really big hurdle. I was like, all right, well, how are we going to, what are we going to do? Who do we need to talk to do this? So I reached out to a gentleman that's now our partner on this particular deal because he had a lot of experience capital raising, syndication, works with lots of high net worth individuals. He's a local attorney in town. And I literally met this guy 10 years ago at one of the very first meetups that I spoke with. And we stay in touch maybe once or twice a year, just coffee, emails back and forth. And I said, you know what? This guy is the perfect guy to bring into this. This is the guy that can bring the capital. This is the guy that can help us put together the capital stack. He's got the legal brain. He's got experience working in the industrial space. It's the perfect thing. And what you find with these larger opportunities, sometimes when you're doing a fix and flip or a wholesale, there's not a lot of pie to go around for multiple people. You know what I mean? You're talking about 20, 30 grand. And if you split that between 2 or 3 people, it's like you're better off working a regular job. But on something like this, there is plenty of money to go around, right? And what I really enjoy and what I pride myself in being is really kind of the connector or the orchestrator of all of these things. I'm really good at that, right? Like, I built a business that created the lead. I've developed Scott, and he's the talent that kind of brought the deal to the finish line. This relationship over here was the relationship that we need to help put the capital stack together. And I am really good at kind of doing all of that orchestration, right? And so I really thrive in that space. That's something that I want to do more of on these larger deals. And it just ended up working out. And what's funny is we thought we were going to end up having to do this big bridge loan, big down payment. And then through just all of these 3 months of negotiations, 3 months of talking to the sellers and going back and forth and deciding on price and figuring out what was going to work, we ended up structuring this incredible seller finance deal where we only ended up having to bring 30% of what we initially needed. And then they seller financed us for 5% interest only when we were looking at bridge loans at like 12%. It ended up working out. And it always speaks to everything that we do. And this deal is a perfect example. Whether you're doing your first wholesale deal, your first $5 million warehouse deal, your first 8-figure $25 million land deal, you just take the very next step and you figure it out as you go. The path will always illuminate as you walk it. And everybody wants to know everything before they jump in. And it just never works like that. It has never worked like that before for me ever one time. Everybody that I talk to that performs at a high level takes action, figures it out as they go. And that's exactly what we did on this. And, it applies towards anything that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask people to go back and watch Jason Pritchard's playlist. Go back to some of the early videos. The reason he's been successful is he doesn't worry about going from A to Z. It's A to B and then B to C.
Yeah.
This is the magic of Jason Pritchard. He's comfortable doing that. Some of you out there tell yourself you've got to know A to Z before you go to B. Jason has clearly told us for 4 or 5 years now that's not how he operates. So just go watch that. Scott, so their first offer was 4.2. It sounds like they got you up a little bit. Where did this deal close at?
We ended up paying $495, which was, they were originally asking $5.5.
Okay.
So we skewed towards the seller's price more, but
they carried it below.
Yes, and in escrow,
that's an easy give.
Just like you're saying, you don't know how it's all going to play out. In escrow, actually 200,000 square feet in the area came up on the market at almost half the price.
Oh,
and that was a newsflash to us. And we called the seller and not panicked, but just said, hey, this is new information that does drastically change how we view the property,
Right.
And, these sellers were extremely transparent, but they were also very well involved with those buildings, and they knew the buildings, and they encouraged us to go walk them ourselves. So we did. And it was pretty clear that the building that we ended up purchasing is substantially better condition and a better asset, but hard to justify that to everybody else, right? And so we ended up working through a negotiation, and instead of lowering the price, they offered to make our life easier in a transition period. And so on this project, the current tenants are on the way out. And that's part of why these sellers were wanting to retire. They didn't want to deal with getting a new tenant. They didn't want to deal with the risk of an empty building. Neither of them really live here locally anymore. And so they were willing to work with us to help mitigate the risk during this transitionary period, finding a new tenant and getting the old tenant out and all of that. But we did end up giving them a price that they were happy with. And the real cherry on top is in the commercial world. Once that new lease is signed, the value changes based on the income, right? Mm-hmm. And so they had it leased out at about 35 cents a foot, which was a very outdated price.
Sure.
And when we were looking and underwriting the deal, it was pretty evident to us the building could lease for 65 cents a foot. And so although we were overpaying now in today's market, as we re-tenant the property, we had a huge upside and a cash flow look. And so it was interesting that the sellers, and this was something I learned in this deal, is that the commercial world, they are more sophisticated owners a lot of the time. And they were able to help not just like butt heads and negotiate like idiots, with each other. Mm-hmm. It was trying to genuinely figure out, okay, what works for us and what works for them, and how do we make it a win-win? And it was just a blessing. Like, I think these guys were genuinely wanting us to succeed.
Yeah, they want you to succeed. They wanted the deal done. They were interested in making it win-win.
Exactly right.
I also think you want to lean on prior experience, right? And you want to look for similarities as you're taking these swings and these big swings at bigger deals, right? Like, what are commonalities that you can find in what you're normally used to doing in your core business that directly overlaps with what we're doing with this deal? And our business is always based on value add deals, right? There's got to be a value add proposition to everything that we're doing. We don't buy turnkey. We don't buy and just wait for the market to go up, right? We've got to be able to force appreciation into our property and add value some way, shape, or form. And in this particular deal, Scott said it, commercial properties, the value is not based on comparable sales, because there are not going to be comparable properties that an appraiser can go out like they have with single family houses. It's based off of how much income we can get the property to generate. And a lot of people like commercial for tons of different reasons. But one of the reasons is you have more control in the right opportunity to increase the value. And so we really see a reality where, as this tenant is leased through December. We've already sat down. This is all due diligence that we did in escrow. We sat down, talked with them, and they said, hey, our lease is through December, but we can be out of here as early as March or April of this year, right? So if you guys find somebody that can come in and you want to lease it to a new tenant, we will work with you and do a concurrent. We'll move out and they'll move in, right? So we structured our owner finance loan in a way where, because of the payment that we have and the rents that we're getting, there's no negative burn rate, right? So we're not stroking a check every month to do it. So that was one of the reasons why we were okay paying the price that we were, because we have enough money coming in from the rents that are coming in. And this is a single tenant, triple net lease, right? We don't have all the expenses that you do with single family houses and apartments and all that stuff. It's interesting. I explained to Jennifer what triple net leases were, and she goes, can we convert all of our tenants to triple net leases? She's like, can all of our, I was like, it doesn't work like that. But I was like cracking up. She's like, wow, this sounds really good. I was like, she goes, I don't have to deal with all the stuff that we deal with anymore. So anyways, our value proposition with this is, right now, we actually have it. We went through, we interviewed some commercial brokers. We hired our buddies that gave us all the due diligence, all that relationship that started 3 or 4 years ago. We've got it on the market for sale and for lease. We'd really like to lease it, but we've got kind of like, if you want to take it off our hands, here's the price that we would do it to take it off your hands. So we paid $4.95 for the building. It's listed for $7.25 for sale. So if somebody wants to give us $7.25, you can have it. But what we'd really like to do is lease it out. So we've got it on the market at 75 cents a square foot. Ideally, we think we can get it somewhere between 70 and 73 cents a square foot. And the floor is 65. We don't see a reality where it goes below, right? So let's just go where everybody's confident that 70 to 72, 73 cents a square foot. If we can, when we find a tenant that can come in and take over the building, we move the old tenant out, the new tenant comes in, and let's say it's 72 cents a square foot or even 70 cents a square foot. At a 6 cap, which is what we believe that this thing will come in at, I think the value of the building is, what, 7.2 million, something like that, Scott, right? So without having to do anything, there is no big capital expenditure because the building is in really good shape. There isn't deferred maintenance like we get with one of these other buildings. The value proposition on this particular deal is just taking the rents up to market rate. That's it. We don't got to go in and fix a bunch of stuff. We don't got it. And we made sure, just the same way that we do in our normal business, we looked at the property, we did our due diligence, we did our inspections, we made sure there were not going to be any big surprises. We leaned into the prior relationships that we had to really determine, like, hey, there's, we wanted to mitigate as much risk as we could so we can go in eyes wide open. Obviously there's risk, and we were okay with the downside. You know what I'm saying? And we know that worst case scenario, this is what the downside is, but we felt really good about the upside. And I think that's the value proposition for us. And it's really it's like a BRRRR. It's like a BRRRR in a single family space. We're buying it. Instead of rehabbing it to increase the value, we're literally just renting it out at market rate, right? And then we go and refinance it, and then we hold it, right? And if we do all of that correctly at a 7.2 evaluation, we should be able to do a full BRRRR where we get all of the capital that we put in, the $600,000 that we put down to get into the property. We pay off the seller's note. We pull all or most of our money back out. And then we've got this Class A property in a great location, right by the airport, single tenant, triple net, 5-year lease, and we're off to the races. Or somebody cashes us out, and I think we take the $2 million and go from there. So either one of those options would be good for us.
Yeah, you're okay with either option, guys?
Yeah.
Shocking. I'm shocked. You guys are crazy.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the beginning. This all started because you have a machine and somebody in the Philippines made a phone call. That's where this started.
That's it. Yep. That's it. And that stuff. Everybody talks to me about, well, how are you doing these deals? And how is this? I did it because I started doing this other stuff 10 years ago. That's how we did it. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it possible, I guess, to just jump into, I guess you can, you know what I mean? But for me, it needed to be this progression that I'm on. It needed to be this natural progression of starting with smaller deals, doing like single family fix and flips, then doing that at volume at scale, then picking up single family rentals, then picking up small multifamily rentals, then picking up apartments, then building out my team, then growing the business to where we're at right now. The whole progression, that 10-year progression, and we talked about that building that instinct as a business owner and all of that stuff, that is what gave me the confidence and the ability to be able to pull the trigger on something like this, right? Without that, I can't do this stuff. There's no way. So you've got to pay the price of admission for some of these things. And this is what it is. The cost of entry for doing some of this stuff is you start and then you naturally progress. And when I look at people that are like friends or mentors of mine, that are people that I'm trying to emulate, almost all of them started doing smaller deals. And then they just eventually just graduated to bigger levels. And then they just decided to just keep going, you know, and that was it. And that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. Well, Scott, do me a favor, give us some closing thoughts and where can people find you?
Easy to find me. It's, I'm Scott Farrow on all social media, but on Instagram, I think my handle is, at sfarrow011. And if I can pay anybody to help me get the bot to delete at Scott Farrow, I will pay you money because I want that handle. But for now, but Scott Farrow everywhere. And then I also have my podcast, Pursuit of Property podcast, where, you know, we talk a lot about a lot of different stuff when you're getting started in the business. So if you are wanting to see two young people and hear our live thoughts as we've developed, we've been doing that for 4 years.
That's awesome. And Jason, you're going to be the closing presentation at our Vegas event. You and I are going to get up there and I'm going to interview you, some Q&A. Folks, if you want to come see Jason, get your questions, you'll have your opportunity in Vegas. Jason, closing thoughts and where they find you?
Yeah, I think closing thoughts would be anybody that is in the early part of their real estate career right now. You have a choice of how you can view your career trajectory and the market specifically that we're dealing with right now. One of those thoughts can be, man, this sucks. It's hard. Everybody's getting out of the business and just buying into that negative news cycle. And I'll tell you exactly how that movie's going to end. You're going to wash out and go do something else. Or you can take the thought process that if I can make it, when I make it in this market right now, when things turn, I'm just going to crush. My business is going to double, triple, 3x. And you can choose. You get to choose whatever story you decide to tell yourself in that situation. And it's 100% a choice, whether you realize that or not. I would encourage you to choose the more powerful, uplifting story. And in order to really put gas on that fire, you need to continue to monitor not only what you're telling yourself, but the people that you're around, right? You need to have other people that share the same thoughts, the same dreams, the same goals, the same vision that can hold you accountable. You need to go to events like the event that you're having in Vegas, our Deal Champs event. If you don't have those people, and you have to make those relationships, guys, they don't just happen and manifest themselves by themselves. You have to put yourself in positions and in rooms where you can do that stuff. And those are all the things, right? Like, I think if Scott had just come into the business and was flying solo and reached that first point where it's there and he didn't have mentors and people to tell him like, no, this is what you need to do, dude, it could be a very different story for him. You know what I'm saying? And so you think about how important those things are in your life. And if you're there, and if you are where Scott was in 2018, 19, and you're there now, don't just make it like, well, the market sucks, and so I'm going to go do something else. You create your own economy, you create your own business. And I think if you take that thought process, the likelihood of success is much higher.
I didn't say my closing thought. Let me tap into that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get that opinion, you will get the same opinions I got, which were people that have done the normal route, and they are going to tell you, it's okay, come back to the other side. It's all good over here. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But you will not have the courage to take the next step if you don't have people that are already doing it, because even those good intentioned family members will tell you to come back. That's just the nature of the beast. So you have to surround yourself with people doing it, or you will get convinced to come back.
Yeah, folks, you got to go to events in person in real life. Deal Champs, one rental at a time. You could join school, measly 67 pennies a day. I don't know why you're not in school already. Or you could also go to jasonpritchard.com. You can follow him on Instagram, or his lovely wife, Jen Pritchard. They are both amazing people. Guys, from unpaid intern to business partner, this has been a great conversation. Folks, if you're still watching, tell me the 3 or 4 nuggets you took from this interview, because I know there's at least 10 or 15 I took. So go ahead and list the top 3 or 4 that you took. I want to read them. Guys, thank you so much.